Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. I know the background is so different. I originally wanted to film in my beautiful library with my beautiful bookshelves behind me, but there is a disturbance outside of the window. And I've already put this video off twice because of this disturbance. There's just something going on in my neighborhood and it's really loud and you can hear it in the background every single time I have to film. I've already pushed this wrap up to like halfway through the next month. So I was like, you know what? We just have to cut it. We just have to go ahead and do it in the bedroom because there's no way I'm gonna get silence to film. Also, is that flickering behind me? Can you see that flickering or is that just how it looks for me? Okay, I'm just gonna have my lights going back there. If it's annoying to you, I'm so sorry. I am just a girl doing the best I can. So this is today's wrap up. Welcome to my April wrap up. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about the 17 books that I read during last month. And before we get into the books, you know the drill. Let's go through some of my stats. As I mentioned, I read 17 books in April for a total of 4,837 pages. Here is my mood breakdown. It is pretty standard. Mysterious, tense, dark, emotional reads. That is what I usually read. And as for pacing, actually 9 of the books that I read were medium paced, which is pretty different. Usually fast paced far outweighs that for me, but I only had 6 fast-paced books this month and no time for slow-paced at all. 7 of the books that I read were in my sweet spot of 300 to 500 pages and 10 were below 300 pages. I read all fiction in the month of April. Here is my genre breakdown as described by Storygraph, but we all know that they don't always get the genre exactly right or exactly how I would categorize a book or maybe how a book should be categorized. So just take that with a grain of salt. Here is my personal genre breakdown. I also have like 5-star and summer thrown in there because this is just by the shelves that I've put these books on my own personal shelves on Storygraph. But I mostly read horror this month and then thrillers and then short stories, romance, fantasy, and YA. Across these 17 reviews that I gave in April, they had an average rating of 4.18 stars. I feel like that is incredible. April was a pretty great reading month for me and I cannot wait to rave about books this month rather than rant. Across my ratings, I had 1 book that was 1.5 stars and you know what? We're just gonna move on for that because I had 2 3 stars, 6 4 stars, a 4.5 star, and 7 5-star books, which I think is pretty incredible. And this is how I read those pages throughout the month. So I had a huge amount of pages read in the beginning half of April and then it kind of tapered off throughout the month. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the books, the reviews, what you came for. And as always, we're gonna start out with my lowest rated book and work our way up to my highest rated book. So we are gonna start out with my 1.5 star rated book, and that is, to no one's surprise, a Natasha Preston book. We have her new release, The Island, and you know what?
You know what?
This book, the concept, as always with Natasha Preston, sounded phenomenal. Like, absolutely knock 'em dead amazing. It was about this group of social media influencers that got invited to this island where they were gonna make this like horror Disney World-esque kind of amusement park. And in this place, on this island, these influencers were gonna like go early, have it all to themselves, take promotional content, all of that stuff, but they ended up getting picked off one by one as they're trapped on the island, which sounds absolutely phenomenal. But as we know with Natasha Preston, the execution just simply never measures up, and that was exactly the case with this. From the predictable plot to the half-baked romance to the YA style writing that is just like inexcusable at this point. I was just annoyed the house down with this book, and I can't even like critique it in a serious way because this is how I felt about every single Natasha Preston book I've almost ever read, except for 2 of them. I gave 2 of them 4 stars and they were really, really, really good. And I feel like I'm just chasing that feeling, but it's honestly, it feels mean at this point to just like keep dragging her for the same stuff. I feel like these are not written for me for the most part, but the synopses sound amazing. Like, I want to take this synopsis and write an adult extreme horror book based on this concept. Natasha, if you're okay with that, let me know. Because the concepts are concepting, but the execution is not executioning. At least not for an adult audience, but even as a YA reader, I would not recommend that book in the slightest. Moving on to my 3-star books, I have a short story collection, Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. And all of these short stories are like weird horror things, but they're just really, really, really weird. That's the thing. This is translated from another language, and I feel like a lot of the barrier between me and enjoying this book was that I had to think about it. I think if I like understood the native language that this was written in, and I was like reading it in that language, it would have been easier to understand. But I think with a translated work, something that's really weird and really conceptual doesn't have a direct translation into another language. So it's a thinker, right? And when I read weird horror, I don't want to have to like put in effort to think about it, to put the metaphors together. I just kind of want it to wash over me and do what a couple other books that I'm going to talk about later on did. And Cursed Bunny did not do that. The first half of the stories I really, really, really loved, but as you keep reading, they get even weirder and longer and more conceptual, and I just lost a lot of the momentum, and I found it really hard to care about the stories when it felt like work to read them. So while I really, really liked the beginning, the end fell flat for me, and obviously each story stands on its own, but I am going to judge the collection as a whole and just put a 3-star on it. I wouldn't necessarily not recommend it. If this sounds like something you'd like, if you're a weird horror fan, maybe try it out. Maybe it's worth it for you for those first few stories that I really enjoyed. But for the most part, I'm not going to widely recommend this one. And the other 3-star book that I read, actually this took me all month to read in April, was Court of the Vampire Queen by Katie Robert. This is a fantasy romance. I know, not my typical genre, and is just under 500 pages, which is insane. And that's why it took me the entire month to read. But y'all, basically this book is just vampire smut. It is reverse harem with our little queen who is like half vampire, half human, and her vampire father is like this king of all the vampires, and he banishes his daughter to like live with this other vampire king as like a gift to him. So she's like,
damn, now I gotta be this other king's sex slave. Ugh, I hate it here.
But little does she know, this guy is like phenomenal and she's gonna fall for him and all of his friends that he invites over. So it was a very fun, smutty time, but let's be honest here, there was no plot. The writing was not really giving. Honestly, it had me cringing a lot of the time, even some of the smut. It was fun. But I'm sorry, if I'm reading a smut scene, this is going to be graphic. I'm sorry. If you're related to me in any way or you want to keep like a pure image of me, please shut this off immediately. But when I'm reading a smut scene and it's just like,
I climaxed.
and then 2 paragraphs later, then he just said this thing and he had this look in his eye and I just climaxed again. It's like, not really. No, I don't think. Maybe if this was like slow burn, tension building sapphic smut, I could believe that a woman orgasmed from a singular facial expression or phrase that was uttered by her partner. But these shallow vampiric men, I really don't believe harness that power. And Katie wanted me to believe that they did, and I wasn't buying it. So even the parts that I really liked just didn't have a lot of depth to it. It was a good fun time, and that's kind of what a 3-star is to me, is like a good fun time, but nothing beyond that. It wasn't something that I'm ever gonna think about ever again. The fantasy plot was not giving like the Dark Olympus series. I feel like I actually do read those books for the plot as well as the smut. This one was just pure smut. You don't need to run out and read it, especially if you're not a long book kind of girl, and I definitely won't be continuing this series if there are more, but it was fun. I'll just leave it at that. Next up, let's get into my 4-star reads, and I believe, yes, almost all of these were featured in vlogs. So I'm not gonna spend a super long time talking about these books because you can go watch my vlogs that I filmed in the month of April for like really full in-depth thoughts on all of these books. I really enjoyed them all and I highly, highly recommend them all. So I did a Sally Hepworth taste test vlog, a Kindle Unlimited vlog, and a Women in Horror vlog. Lots of reading vlogs throughout the month of April. I will link them up above and down below so you can watch all of those for in-depth thoughts. But if you're just here for the quick and dirty reviews, let's get into it. First 4-star book I read was Grandpappy by PC3 or CP3. I don't know. I always flip that around, but this author is an extreme horror author, and Grandpappy is an extreme horror novel about this boy who his parents send him to go take care of his grandpa. Okay, grandpa's down bad. We don't really know what's going on with him. We just know like he's basically an invalid, and this kind of like deadbeat young 20s, early teens, college kid is sent to take care of his granddad. So we're like, okay, what's going on? What's going on with granddad?
A lot.
And our narrator is completely unreliable. He's like losing track of time, not feeding his grandpa, like not rolling him. He's supposed to like roll him so he doesn't get bed sores, and he's not doing that. And we just watch this boy descend into a madness. This book goes off the rails. If you want some absolutely gross, disgusting, brutal, unhinged extreme horror, this is it. I really enjoyed it, but it didn't hit in the way that a 5-star book has to hit for me. Oh my gosh, Mochi, hello. Can you see this? This is so funny. Mochi was literally so shook by Grandpappy, he literally just had to come out and say hello, and I don't blame him because this book was a ride. I don't want to spoil any part of it, but if you like gross horror, this is definitely for you. A KU thriller that I gave 4 stars this month was Run on Red by Noelle West Ely. Hopefully I got that author's name right because I don't have it right in front of me. This was a high-octane, fast-paced thriller about 2 girls who are driving out to a party, like a beach kind of bonfire party on a rural road, and they are getting followed. They just see those headlights following a little too close, and we follow this extreme, not extreme horror, but like extremely intense, heart-pumping kidnapping story as these 2 girls are trying to evade these kidnappers, and it goes so much deeper than that, and it was so twisty, so fast-paced, so amazing. I rarely get this feeling anymore from contemporary thrillers that are being published today. I feel like they're all kind of copy-paste, and this one is not like that. It truly stood out. Highly recommend if you're looking for a good classic thriller on KU. And another thriller that is actually a new release that stood out to me was Lovely Girls by Margot Hunt. This one's also a 4-star. I've really enjoyed Margot Hunt in the past, so maybe this is a new favorite for me. I need to do a deep dive taste test on her work because it seems like I just really click with her writing style. Lovely Girls is following this new duo, mother-daughter duo, that's new to town, and they're kind of mixing things up a little bit. The way that they are integrating into the community is not so flawless. I'll just say that. There are a lot of rumors swirling about the mom friend group and about the teen girl friend group, and we follow the drama in both of them as this like blackmail plot comes up. Everyone has secrets. The moms, the teen girls, and it all comes to a head. It was just juicy suburban suburban rich people drama. So if you like that, you're going to love this. It wasn't anything too deep, definitely wasn't a 5-star. I will probably forget about it by the end of the year, and it definitely won't be something I'm gonna like keep talking about, but it was so fun. When I read it, I got through it so quickly. I feel like if you like rich people drama, this will get you out of a slump and entertain you for sure. Going back to horror, I want to talk about The Devil Crept In by Anya Alborn. This was giving me all of the like It vibes. It kind of gave Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum, like that kind of like following a young group of kids POV, really dark, twisty horror from a innocent POV. That is this. And we are following this little boy, and his cousin has gone missing. And this is not the first disappearance that's happened in this town. Dogs and cats have notoriously gone missing, and also another little boy went missing as well. But it seems like no one in the town wants to talk about it or address it or even find out what is happening with these disappearances. But this little boy is set on finding what happened to his cousin, because his cousin is truly his only friend. He gets bullied in school. He's kind of an outcast. So that was like his one person, and he's going to do anything he can to find out what happened to him. And y'all, this book is so weird. It's so dark. It's so weird. It's just like, oh my God, this like horrifying feeling washes over you when you get to part 2 and you kind of find out what's happening with the disappearances, because we are not only following our little boy main character who's trying to figure out what happened to his cousin, but we're also following the, how do I put this without spoiling it, the source of the disappearances, and it is definitely not what you would think. The end went off. It didn't give me that 5-star feeling, but it was close, and I feel like this could definitely be a 5-star for a lot of you out there, especially if you like that detailed, emotional writing. It's kind of giving Stephen King, but just not nearly as dense, a lot more readable, but just didn't give me that feeling, unfortunately. Still a great one though. Next up, I have to talk about Mother Thing by Ainsley Hogarth. Oh my gosh, this one really surprised me. I don't know why. I just went into this one not with the highest expectations, but it definitely exceeded the expectations that I had. It had great twists, a great balance between like wondering if our main character is really unreliable and crazy, or if the horror that's actually happening is real. Basically, we're following this girl who has a lot of trauma. She had a very complicated relationship with her mother, and now she's getting married, and she really wanted that mother relationship with her mother-in-law. However, the mother-in-law is an absolute nightmare, like actually a horrible person, and the husband just doesn't quite seem to see it. But the mother-in-law actually ends up committing suicide, and this happens in chapter 1. We totally know about it. It's on the back cover, so no spoilers here. But she comes back and is haunting the husband as well as the wife. So we're trying to figure out, is this all in their head? Is this just the effects of like generational trauma? Or is she actually a ghost? And all of these things are going on. There are a lot of subplots that come together at the end. It was a little abrupt. I feel like the pacing in here was almost a little too fast, but it came together in a way that I really enjoyed, and I loved the discussions of generational trauma. So this is one that I really recommend if you are thinking that this is just a cute cover or not anything that you would be interested in. Trust me, pick it up. It's a lot better than I feel like how it's being marketed as. It has a lot more plot than I expected it to have. Even though it is like mainly character driven, there was more plot in there, and it's really fast paced. So highly recommend. And the last 4-star book that I have to tell you guys about is actually the book that I read for my book club over on Patreon. If you don't know about my Patreon, I always have it linked down below. I have a book club over there called the Pretty Girl Book Club, and it's literally $5 a month if you want to read a book along with me. We have reading sprints, we have book discussions, we have extra videos, reading vlogs, all this fun stuff over there. So it's always linked down below. And a lot of people just joined when I talked about it in my TBR. So if you just joined, hi, welcome, thank you. If you haven't, check it out. In April, we read The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth, and I really ended up enjoying this one. I think there's a lot of nuanced conversation to be had about a lot of different discussions that are brought up in this book, specifically about suicide awareness, suicidal ideation, all of that good mental health stuff that I love to discuss. We had an amazing discussion in the book club with my friend Aspen from Aspen's Archives. Go subscribe to her if you're not already. And if you join the Patreon, even if you didn't read this along with us in April, highly recommend going back to watch our live discussion. It's saved to Patreon, so you gotta watch it just to like hear the in-depth thoughts. But basically, let me tell you the synopsis of this book. We are following this couple who lives on the edge of a cliff. And the cliff that they live on is a notorious spot where people go to unalive themselves. So the husband takes it as his like unofficial duty to talk down the people on the ledge. That's like his job. And one day he fails at his job and they actually end up jumping. And the wife is like,
something's going on here. Because this wasn't like the other times when he talked people down.
And she starts to suspect that maybe he had a hand in this woman's death. It goes a lot more in depth from there. A lot of things come out. I thought the twists were amazing. I absolutely loved it. Kept me on the edge of my seat. And like I said, a lot of discussions opened up, which I really love when a thriller is not just like a good, fun, twisty time, which this was, but it also has a lot more to say and a lot more to discuss. Even if it doesn't have the best representation for mental health, I'm not gonna say that a thriller has to have perfect mental health representation. Like at the end of the day, we don't read a thriller for that. We read a thriller for entertainment, but it opened up the conversation and I did appreciate that. So I loved it. Gave it 4 stars. Not a favorite, but definitely recommend it. Aspen, though, gave it 1 star. So you know what? Maybe this will not be everyone's thing. If you read it, I would love to hear your take on it. The 4.5 star that I read in the month of April was Only the Stains Remain by Ross Jeffrey. And this one is intense. It's not necessarily extreme horror, but it is pretty brutal horror. I would compare it to something like Dear Laura or maybe True Crime by Samantha Kolesnik. I don't know. I don't remember authors on KU because I never look at the covers. But I did read this one on KU. And we are following this guy as he is trying to get revenge on the people who basically caused him and his brother's childhood trauma. He's going back now as an adult and picking them off one by one. So we follow him on this crusade to get revenge. It is so brutal. It is so intense. It has a lot of discussions about trauma and how it affects you and how it follows you. And it's a very cathartic release just to like watch him literally slay the demons that took hold of his child self and still have a stranglehold on his inner child as an adult. I loved it, loved it, loved it. But I couldn't give it a 5 star because it was just a little monotonous at times. I feel like a lot could have been cut out. It was about 200 pages and I feel like the story would have had even more impact if all of that gruesomeness was packed into, say, like 130, 150 pages. I just felt myself my mind was wandering at times, but it was really, really great horror. If you're looking for something on the edge between horror and extreme horror, I think this fits in there well. Maybe if you are wondering about extreme horror, this would be a good intro, especially because it really treats the issues that it's talking about with a lot of respect. And I know sometimes that's an issue for me when I read extreme horror. It feels like it's just for shock value, or like the author doesn't really give credence
Jump scare credence
to the issues that they're talking about, but this one definitely does. So highly, highly recommend it. With all of those caveats, with trigger warnings, please look it up, especially if you're sensitive to animal stuff. This has a lot of stuff with piggies, so very sad, but look out for that if that's a trigger for you. Otherwise, enjoy.
I don't know necessarily enjoy, but
have the time that you have. And finally, I get to tell you guys about all of the 5-star reads that I had in April. I loved so many books that I read this month. All the 4 stars I loved, but these are like obsession level good. And we're gonna start out with my king, Eric LaRocca. Eric LaRocca. I hear people say it both ways. I'm confused. Bestie, can we please clarify? But this is his new short story collection, and I am obsessed with it. It's called The Trees Grew Because I Bled There. It is weird LGBTQIA short horror story collection, and I feel like this is his best work. Like, they really went off with this one. I don't know what it is, just like every single story hit. There is not a bad story in this collection, and that is why it gets 5 stars from me. It's really hard to write a short story collection that gets 5 stars from me because every single story has to bang, and all of these do. If you like the feel of the viral book by this author, Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, then you're gonna love this one. Honestly, a lot of these have the same kind of feeling as that one, where it feels like a Black Mirror episode is unfolding in front of you. It's just like a little bit darker, bordering on extreme horror at times, but again, Eric really balances the weight of the topics that he's covering and the like metaphors and analogies that are brought up with the gruesome horror. It's the perfect balance. It's why his last release got into my top books of 2022, and I can definitely see this one being one of my top books of 2023. I already cannot wait to read their next novel, which is Everything the Darkness Eats, so keep an eye out for that. I definitely will be obsessed. Go buy it immediately. And totally switching gears, I have another romance to talk about, and that is Happy Place by Emily Henry. This is another book that I feel like is the best of this author's work. I notoriously love Emily Henry, and Happy Place is my favorite of all of her books. In this one, we are following a engaged couple. Well, all their friends think they're engaged, but they've actually ended their engagement. But they had this trip happening with their friend group, and they didn't want to tell them because they wanted to go on the trip. They didn't want to ruin it for anyone or like dampen the mood. So they just fake stay in a relationship for the trip, but they end up like re-finding each other and rekindling the love that they had when they first got together over the course of the trip. It is adorable. It has all the spring and summer vibes. It has great representation for like mental health. Even like the friend group is very, very diverse, race-wise, but also sexuality-wise, which I definitely appreciated. And each character, they're not just like a throwaway piece of the friend group. They each have their own individual story, and it all comes through. I loved reading the group dynamic. That honestly was what I fell in love with even more than our main couple, although I did love them as well. Our hero and our heroine were just like so cute, and they had their own issues, but like you understood them so deeply. The amount of empathy that I had for these characters is incredible. It never ceases to amaze me how Emily Henry crafts her 2 main characters. Her love interests are just phenomenal. So if you are a romance lover, or even if you're not, definitely check out Happy Place. I know that's not my usual genre, so y'all might not trust me, but for this one, you definitely should. Next, let's talk about Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. Wow, is this one controversial? When I give this one 5 stars in my Women in Horror vlog, I don't think I've ever gotten more comments saying I gave that 1 star, I hated it. But I also don't know if I've gotten more comments saying, thank God someone else loves this book. I felt so alone. So this one's very divisive, but I just happened to end up on the love it side of the equation, which I'm very happy about. This one is very weird, okay? I'm not going to recommend this widely, but if you like weird, plotless, character-driven feminist horror, this is for you. If all those caveats apply to you, then definitely pick this up. We're following this housewife, and she's feeling just a little purposeless, a little run down in her life as a stay-at-home mom. She's lost a lot of her passion for her work and a lot of her sense of self. So she starts noticing different changes in herself, not only emotionally, but physically, and she begins to fear that she is turning into a dog. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I loved every second of this book. It really made me think, but it did not make me work for it. And that is the type of conceptual horror that I love. It also really had something to say. It stayed in its lane. It said it. That's perfect to me. Next up, we're gonna jump back into thrillers, starting with The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. Y'all, this thriller made me cry. I did not expect this one to come out the gate and get me like it did, but I could literally talk about this one for hours. I wish this was a book club pick so I could have a discussion about it. I loved it so much. It's a really convoluted plot and it's hard to sell you on. So I'm not gonna give it to you. Instead, I'm just gonna tell you why I love this book. And if you identify with any of these things, if you like any of these things, if they sound good to you, you should pick it up. If you like a character-driven thriller that doesn't lack in a twisty plot, it is a twisty plot, but it is slower than other thrillers. If you like a family drama with a lot of generational trauma rep, if you like reading from a neurodivergent main character perspective, if you like stuff about sibling relationships, if you like just a touch of romance in your thrillers, then you will love The Good Sister. It has all of that and so much more, but mainly this thriller has heart, it has empathy, it has depth of emotion and understanding for its characters. This just feels like a very respectful thriller. I think that's the best way that I can put it. The mental health stuff that came up in The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth, we can debate about how good or not it was. In here though, it just had so much empathy and respect that I really appreciated it. Also love the neurodivergent rep in here. It was just so charming and so wonderful, but it didn't lack on the like dark kind of creeping thriller plot. I would brand it more as a suspense than a thriller, but if again, any of that sounds good to you, please read it. Don't underestimate her. I did not expect this to be a 5-star, but I'm so happy that it was. And I would not be surprised if this ended up on my favorites of the year. Now let's talk about another PC3, that guy. Another book by him, and this is kind of a light extreme horror. I would recommend it for beginners to the genre. It's on KU. It's called 100% Match. And we're following this gross kind of like incel man as he goes through the world trying to find his perfect match. He doesn't just want to sleep with some girl, he wants his perfect soulmates. And in his hunt for that match, a lot's going wrong. There are just some wires in this man's brain that are a little bit crossed. So if you like following kind of a damaged psychopath who kind of justifies his flawed logic, if you like following like a Joe Goldberg-esque kind of main character, you're gonna like this. It's really short. It's pretty gruesome and gross for the length of the book, but it's not too far. So it was just the perfect balance for me, and it's pretty psychological, but it doesn't skimp on the grossness. So I just feel like this book is a great balance and a horror book that would appeal to a wide audience, even if you think that you don't like weird extreme horror. If you hear me talk about that stuff and you're like, okay, skip, get to the thrillers, I would really encourage you to take a look at this one. I feel like it's different from the other stuff that I talk about, and it was such an easy 5-star. I got that feeling from chapter 1. When I read the last sentence of chapter 1, that's when I was sold, and I highly recommend it. Another extreme horror that I read on KU and gave 5 stars was Shared by Two by John Athan. Y'all know I'm a hoe for John Athan. I love John Athan. He writes with that same respect that I really need to get on board with extreme horror. Although this one was a lot more psychological than like body horror. We are following this horror author who switches up his genre, and one of his most dedicated readers and fans is really upset with him for that. So he starts sending letters. And then when the letters go unanswered, he starts showing up outside this author's home. And then when that doesn't get through to him, the stalker situation intensifies and intensifies until we are fearing for this author's life. But at the same time, we don't know if this stalker is actually real or if maybe this is just the author's paranoia. It's so psychological. It's so good. It keeps you guessing the entire time. That ending sequence, the last few chapters, flew. The pacing was amazing. It starts out like creeping and psychological, and then it goes at this breakneck pace at the end. It's so brutal. It's so great. There are scenes from the gore in this book that will live rent-free in my mind forever. I am obsessed. This is the gold standard for extreme horror for me personally, for my taste. So yet again, no one is doing it like John Nathan. And now we're getting into my top book of the month. I'm literally gagged over this book. I'm so mad that I didn't vlog it because I had such a chaotic experience reading this book. My emotions were everywhere. I felt like I was getting whipped around on like a carnival ride. Like, you know, those like janky carnival rides that would randomly be inside like a Chuck E. Cheese? I don't know if y'all had that. There was this place, if you're a Houston girly, maybe you know it. It was called It's. And it was like a Chuck E. Cheese, but for like middle school, high schoolers. And it had this random carnival ride inside. I just know that shit was not regulation. Like, everyone's kneecaps were inches away from being busted out as we like spun around on this thing. That is how I felt. I felt like I was back at It's when I was reading this book. It is so intense and so amazing. And that is Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. Y'all, I was so nervous to read this book because of how much I loved Razorblade Tears by this author. Take how I felt about Razorblade Tears and multiply it by 5. That is how I feel about Blacktop Wasteland. Between the characters and the pacing, I don't know how anyone cannot love this book. Like, I was so aligned with our main character. He is this guy who was a getaway driver for like sketchy people. He wouldn't do like necessarily the crimes, but he would help them get away with it because he's like the best driver ever. He would literally whip them out of any sketchy situation. But he's done, okay? That life of crime is behind him. He's trying to make an honest living. But then things start adding up, as they do. I think everyone can relate to this. You think you're in a good spot, and then all of a sudden, like, your kid needs fucking braces, or your dog gets hit by a car and you gotta have surgery for it, or, you know, your partner has some medical issue going on and they need surgery. Like, and things just, one too many things pile up and you get desperate. And so when this big job comes up, he's like, you know what? I thought I was done with this life, but I'm not. I gotta do it. I gotta do it for my family. And that just raises the stakes so much because you care about the character and his family. Oh my God, I literally love him. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry thinking about it. And we follow him as he's on this getaway driver job and things start going off the rails. My heart was pumping. I'm literally sweating talking about it because I'm thinking back to how I felt reading it. It's so intense, but you never lose that humanity for the characters. Where Razorblade Tears was like giving full on action, this is giving action with a side of I literally would die for this main character and his entire family. It is heart-wrenching, it's intense, sometimes it's funny, like it just takes you on this wild ride and I'm obsessed with it. If you take any recommendation from this video, any at all, please let it be Blacktop Wasteland. I loved this book more than a book that I read in a long time. This is definitely a favorite of the year. It's giving like the level of blood sugar. Like when I had my blood sugar moment last year in 2022, I read it and immediately I closed the thriller and I was like, this is my best book of the year. This is it. This is it. This is it. And I had that this year with How to Sell a Haunted House and now with Blacktop Wasteland. Like those two, they're like neck and neck for my best book of 2023. So you heard it here. You got to go get it and read it for yourself. It's so short. It's so fast paced. Like literally anyone can read this. It's under 300 pages. It's so accessible. I feel like it's very relatable for a wide audience, even if you're not like a Black man struggling with a former life of crime. Like obviously I'm a little white girl and I've never committed a crime in my life, but I still was relating to this man. Like S.A. Cosby is just so talented. He's just so talented. I could sit here and rave about it all day, but I will just leave you with please read this book. All right, that is going to be it for my April wrap up. I hope you enjoyed this video and you got a couple recommendations for me. If you enjoyed it, please like this video if you liked it and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to go to therapy and read a book this week, and I will see you guys in my next one. Hopefully we will be back in a normal location with all my beautiful books behind me. All right, see you then. Bye.